Hello again. In this video I want to look a little bit more closely at filters, which are a useful way to select and query your models, but also the paths within the Path Explorer to exclude or include certain features of the model to generate paths, but also they're a useful way to see the content of the paths themselves in a different way in the view dock. Firstly, we'll look at filter types and the nature of the attributes that you can query on within the filters. We'll look at filters applied to models to look at subsets of the content of the models, and then on generated test cases on the paths generated by the Path Optimizer. Finally, we'll look at filters in the view dock, which allow you to selectively view content of paths to help you understand what's going on. We'll do a quick demo and then there'll be a summary at the end. So here we are again in GeoDesigner. I'm going to use a model which I created for testing a REST service and use that to demonstrate how we can use filters to select content and query our models. I can use filters to query, if you like, the content of the model. So I think of filters more as like a query tool to select content from the model in this case. So let's go into the filters, which is part of the design options in the tool. And you see a little docked area over here on the right. Now, filters are comprised of a combination, or can be comprised of a combination of different filter types. And if you like, these are kind of elements or attributes of the model, or elements of the model, which you can use to select content from the model itself. Now, the first thing to note is that some of the options in the filter types are plain black and some are blue. So you can see that the filter types in black only apply to blocks, so decisions and processes and so on. Filter types in blue apply to all items, so it includes the decision outcomes as well in the model. So if we take a selection of some of these file types, we can just take a closer look at them. The first one is block type. So in here we can select the filter type, we add it to the canvas, and you can see that we can make a choice on the type of block. So let's look at code actions, and by and large these are the purple elements I expect to see. If I apply that filter, I see just the decisions. So I can use the filters to selectively view contents of the model. So if I want to look at all the data elements in the model, there are none in this model. If I want to look at all the error outcomes, I'm hoping I'll see the red processes here. Yeah, there we go. Now the neat thing about the filter canvas is that you can create quite complex queries and combinations of selections and filter types, if you like. So suppose I want to look at elements on the model which represent code actions. So that's this choice here. And I can use OR to make a second choice. So if I add block type again, I could say I want to see block types of code actions or errors. And if we apply that now, we see both the decisions that were identified as code actions and the error blocks, which represent the error outcomes from the call to the service. So you can see that you can add more and more complex combinations of filter types to create very sophisticated queries on the model. Now, a very sophisticated query on a very simple model wouldn't make a lot of sense, but if your models are very large, potentially you have the filters to help you navigate and view the model from different perspectives. Now the other thing I can do here is I can save a filter. So if you look down the bottom here, I have a filter applied. I can store this filter and give it a name, code, action and error blocks, for example. So we save that, and that filter is available for use in viewing the model in future, but I might also be able to use it in other places because filters have a presence in several areas of the ARD tool. So if I choose to add code, action and error blocks, you can see that if I add it again, I could add it multiple times. Now this would be a bit silly. If I actually apply it, you'll see I get a problem because I haven't had an operation in between each of these elements here. So I can use these keys down here to delete elements in the canvas, but also navigate. So I can't use the cursor so much as I use this arrow to go left, and if you can see the cursor here just ticking away, I can move it to the left, and in here I might put in another OR, and if I go back a bit further I could add another OR, and if I go back a little bit further again, I have another OR. Now this isn't a very useful query because it's the same thing 4 times over, but if I run it, it should still work and should give me the same outcome on the view of the model itself. So if I apply filters now, I see the same outcome. Now if, as is obviously the case, I want to delete some of these elements on the filter canvas, I could go to the end of the canvas content and use the del key, and the del key basically deletes backwards. It deletes one element to the left of the cursor, so I can just delete things quite happily as I go back in this way. Now I can also delete in the middle of the element, so I could delete that or I can delete the block type, and if I go to the end again, the right arrow, I can delete the final block, and basically the filter's been completely removed. So I can apply filters, I can clear the filter, which would have the effect of clearing the canvas. Cancel will close the dock on the right, and I can store filters for later use, and at the moment I've got one, which is code, action and error blocks. So that's how we use filters on the model itself to selectively view the content of models. Let's look now at the Path Explorer and how we can apply filters to path. Now you can see from my previous sessions that I've actually created and stored 506 test cases for the model in here. So let's just look at how we generate test cases and how the filter affects how the test cases, the paths, are actually generated and affected. So let's look at the filters again. I'll take the block type query again, the filter type, we'll add that, and let's say I'm going to select all blocks that are code actions, which is the core of the model. When I come to generate all possible paths, which is how I got the 506, you can see over here, let's see how that works. And nothing, we get not a thing. What's actually happening here? Well, the default setting for filters in the optimizer is what's called exclusive filtering, and you can see if I go into the path settings, we have this selection exclusive filtering. This is the default, and exclusive filtering only creates paths based on the elements that are selected by the filter, and exclusively the elements that are selected by the filter. So what we have is a filter which identifies all the decisions in effect, but it ignores all the other elements in the model. And the thing is, you cannot create a path just using the decisions from this model. So exclusive filtering is very restrictive in this respect. So let's look at inclusive filtering. Now in this case, what inclusive filtering does is it says generate all paths and filter out those that touch or exercise the elements that are filtered out by the filter. So if you like, we're going to get all paths that include any of the decisions that the filter has left in the selection. So if we apply inclusive filtering and apply that, I would expect we would get all 506 paths again, as if there were no filter applied at all. And there we go. So a more interesting filter might be to look at block types which are, say, errors. So here, if we apply that filter and run the optimizer again, we get 74. So in this case, you can see if I scroll through the paths, we only get the paths that end in an error. So I hope that makes sense to you. So with filters on the path optimizer, the path settings is critical. It's possibly not the best setting to have the default as exclusive, but it kind of makes sense with respect to if you're filtering out elements and you're creating paths from those elements, that exclusive filtering would make sense. So be aware that if you're not getting anything out of the optimizer with a filter applied, it might be because of this inclusive exclusive setting here. If we look at the test cases that are already saved, we've also got an option to use a filter there. Now you'll notice when we look at this, it's the number of filter types is really quite limited because these apply to the model as a whole. So if I look at plain text and add that as a filter, and I look at origin as the text of one of the elements towards the end of the model and apply that, we actually get 480 out of our 506. Now origin, if you can see it there, is quite late in the model where most of the error conditions will have already bailed out of the model, if you like, of the process. So every path, every test case that goes through the origin element here, that would be the majority of the test cases, the paths themselves. So as you see, we get 480 out of 506 in total. So that kind of makes sense, as you see. Now the next thing I want to look at, if we go back to the optimizer, we also have a filter on the view dock to the right, and you can see that there's actually already a filter being applied from a previous session, which limits what you see in this listing here. If I go into the filter, you can see that I've chosen to filter out symbol type, which is the type of element, type of block on the model, which are processes or symbol type decisions. So I've excluded, if you like, the start and end blocks from the listing on the right. I hope you can see that. So as I scroll through the paths, you don't see the yellow start and end and error elements. Now this might be helpful if you were exporting the paths to a spreadsheet. You don't actually need in the spreadsheet perhaps the start and end elements, if that makes sense. So if I actually want to see all the elements of the model in the view dock here, I could simply change the filter or just remove it completely. and now I see everything in the view dock here. So we've seen that filters are a great way to query models, as they help you to quickly select subsets of the model elements or attributes of the model to show different perspectives of the model content in detail. They allow you to explore the model and perhaps demonstrate to stakeholders what's going on in a bit more detail. Now, in the Path Explorer, when you use filters, you can select subsets of elements to be included in the paths that are generated, or to generate paths that exclusively use the elements that are selected by the filter itself. So if you have some kind of special requirement to do this, perhaps to generate paths that are the negative paths or paths that exercise specific areas of the model, you can filter these paths out and perhaps save them as a different path type. You can also use filters to examine the stored paths using a more limited set of filter types that act only on the model as a whole. But even so, this could be useful in certain circumstances for you. Finally, using filters in the viewport, you can view and export subsets of elements derived from the stored paths.